Howdy, everyone. Okay, so I am working on this this intersection fairing here, and I'm going to show you basically how I get started and how I locate at least the initial hole to hold it in place so I can basically work on the rest of it, so to speak. So I'm just going to kind of demonstrate how I get started, just the very basics of starting to do the fit for this upper fairing. So I've got my pre-molded fairing here, and all I do at this point is I fit it in place and I just kind of hold it to the fuselage and hold it to itself. I don't cram it in here really tight. I just want a kind of a nice loose fit. Up underneath in this back area here, underneath the fuselage, I have a couple of small, well, I have one small antenna and the fuel tank vent. The back part of the fairing, the part of the fairing that fits up behind the leg, up against the fuselage, that may or may not interfere with that vent line, and if you have an antenna nearby, so you may have to pre-trim this a little bit to clear anything that you might have back in underneath here. I've already done that, so this fairing now matches the other fairing on the other side. I had done that one yesterday. I did not have to trim it. I did have to trim this one, but now this shape matches the other fairing really nice. So now I can fit this in here cleanly with nothing rubbing, nothing interfering on the back side. And I just basically hold it in place, position it to where I'm happy with it. Using a Sharpie marker, I then trace this outline of the fairing onto the fuselage. And like I said, I had done the other side earlier, so I had decided to use this row of rivets here. So when you look at your outline, you can see where the fairing is going to lay, and you can see where you have existing rivets, and you can see where you can maybe put other rivets in here to help attach the fairing to the fuselage. The thing to keep in mind is the structure behind here. Behind these rivets, there is the metal, it's actually a steel bracket that's part of the structure that holds the engine mount in place. That's a steel piece, it's white powder coated steel. And then along this length, there's a heavy aluminum angle that's in here. I chose not to drill into that metal piece, and I also wanted an attach point toward the aft end of the fairing, because my plan is to have a screw toward the aft end, and then up here on this forward edge there'll be another one, but that's part of the cowling. So for now I just want to get a single screw started. So this is a pretty beefy structure. I elected to drill through the aluminum angle only. I'm aft far enough so that I don't need to drill through that metal, that piece of steel. So I just counted back same number of rivets that I had on the other side, and I draw a line through the center of those rivets. And then I come between these two rivets here and mark a center line. So from the row of rivets that make up the firewall rivets, if you will, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Between the 6th and 7th rivet, in line with the rivets, a center line. So then I took a number 6, a number 6 nut plate, and all I do is I put the rivet hole of the nut plate on that center line, and you can see that I have hopefully you can see that I've extended a center line perpendicular straight up. That's this line right here. So this line is perpendicular to the row of rivets. And I had done that just using a simple little protractor. Hopefully that's in focus. And that I use that to mark my vertical center line, or my vertical piece here. Take a nut plate, I put the rivet hole of the nut plate on my cross reference here. And then I align the nut plate with the vertical line, the other hole of the nut plate with the vertical line. And then I mark the hole location where the actual screw is going to go into. So the nut plate will get riveted here in line with these rivets, between the rivets. And then the bolt, the hole for the bolt itself is also marked here. And then this top ear of the nut plate, I'm going to cut it off. I'm not going to use it. I'm only going to use one ear. So now I have the location. I need to drill a small hole here to rivet the nut plate in place. And then I've got my location here for the actual bolt to go through. And you can see the difference between where the bolt is going to go and the edge of the fairing. I've got plenty of edge distance. That's, in this instance, that's slightly greater than 3/8 of an inch. So like I said, I'll drill this for a rivet. I'll drill this for the actual screw. And then ultimately, this nut plate will get this top ear cut off, and it will get riveted right here in line with the rest of the rivets. And then that will be my first hole location for the fairing. So after I get those drilled, I'll simply do some measurements. I'll measure from the edge of the fairing down to the hole, and I'll try to get a measurement in this orientation. And then I'll mark that on the fairing itself, drill a pilot hole, and then I can fit it back into place. Try to hold it as best as I can, and then kind of match drill it. So that's how I get started. And then I'll do the same thing for underneath. For underneath back here, I'll kind of do the same thing. However, you can do it backwards, because underneath here there's nothing in the way. There's no structure of any kind. It's just the skin, the bottom skin of the airplane. So what I'll do at that point, I'll just drill the hole in the fairing first. And then I'll position the fairing, and then I'll match drill the hole that's in the fairing into the skin. But I only do that after I have this one done, because this one helps hold it in place. So I'll have this back in place. I'll have this clecoed here through that hole, and then I'll use a cleco clamp and clamp it here. And then I'll get up underneath, decide where I want to mark the hole on the bottom side, mark it, drill it on the fairing, fit it underneath, cleco, clamp it, and then match drill it. So that's kind of the process. I just wanted to point that out real quick. Rather than doing it and then talking about it after, I thought I'd talk about it a little bit before I actually start. So let me get that done, and I will talk to you guys later. One more thing I just thought of. When you go to drill these holes, so this is the other side of the airplane. You can see I've got the holes drilled. So this hole here is for the rivet that's been countersunk for the rivet, and then this hole is where the bolt will go through to the nut plate. And like I said, this top ear doesn't exist. I will cut that off. So the nut plate will get riveted in this location on the inside. But what I recommend, again, I've done this before in the past, is I use blue tape to prevent chips from getting into places that I don't want them to get into. When you drill these holes, you'll get a lot of chips, believe it or not, especially when you countersink. And those fine shavings are going to find their way into your fairing through the top here. They're going to end up going down the fairing, and they're going to get trapped between the fairing, the leg fairing, and the intersection fairing here, and possibly between the intersection fairing and the wheel fairing here. So I just taped up all my seams just to keep chips from getting in there. Of course, ultimately, this is all going to come apart because it needs to come apart for painting. or wrapping, such as I'm going to try. And of course, none of this can be in place when you have the plane inspected for first flight. So this will all come off anyway, but save yourself the trouble and headache. I recommend just taping off any areas that you don't want metal chips to get into, and you'll have less cleanup and things of that nature down the road. So I'm going to tape up the other side. I'm going to get to drilling. I'll talk to you guys later. Howdy, everyone. All right, this is the top right fairing now temporarily in place. And I say temporarily just because you can see that this front half here extends out into where the engine cowling is going to go. So obviously I can't do anything more with this until I have the cowling in place. I've only got a single screw hole here, and then I've got another one up underneath right here. And that's all I'm going to do for now. You can see I've got a little bit of a gap here, but that's all right. I just wanted to get the basic fit up on these top ones up until I get the cowling in place. Once the cowling is in place, then I could move this around a little bit and position it permanently. Add a couple of screws up here into the cowling, maybe add another one in here somewhere, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's as far as I'm going to go with these for now. So I'm moving on to other things, and the other things are I need to add the propeller. Once I have the propeller on, then I can go ahead and do the cowlings. I need to have the propeller installed because my MT propeller, the spinner, of course the spinner can come off, but the rear bulkhead of the spinner is attached. So I can't just put the bulkhead in place. I need to install the complete propeller. So I'm not quite ready to do that, so I've moved on to fitting the baffles. I know just about everybody fits the baffles after the cowling is complete. I'm probably going to do a little bit of both, but just for starters, I'm going to get cranking on these on the baffles. So I've got a brand new baffle kit. I'm building it from scratch, and when you look at the written instructions, they just have you start with this side piece here, and you rivet these reinforcement plates in place. This particular piece will then get bolted to the number 4 cylinder here. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm just prepping this baffle piece to fit around these new valve covers. I need to do a little bit of trimming on the baffle piece to fit around the valve cover nicely so I can get the 2 baffle bolts into place. So that's all I'm going to work on now, is just getting this piece to fit, and from there I will move on to I'll progress through putting creating the baffle and trying to get it to fit along the back side. I don't know how much I'll do. Like I said, I know that most people do the cowlings first. I don't know that I'll do the complete baffle. I'm not there yet, so I'm just kind of picking at it for now and trying to figure out when I want to get the prop put on, how I'm going to get the prop put on, and then do the other things. So that's where I am at the moment, and that's about it for now. So I will talk to you guys later.